Come on, let's get some of the lads together. Let's have a good old sing song, yeah. Okay, yeah, all right. Come on, fellas. Get around the piano. Let's have a good go. Come on, then. You ready? Come on, you lot. Come on, then.
Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Lincoln City are the team, the Radiance is their name. Stinsel Bank is their home ground and football is their game. So come and cheer them on, you lads, support them all the way. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our...
Morning everybody, how we doing? First dog walk of the new year. It's a breezy one up here, we've got a bit of news to chat haven't we? So if the sound is interrupted by the wind at all, please let me know in the comments. It's really, really windy, but there's a couple of sound tests before I started. Just a little bit of housekeeping from today onwards. I'm going to endeavour to put my dog walk videos that are 15 minutes or longer onto the podcast channel through the TalkSport network. Two reasons really. One, it just makes them more accessible. Certainly lots more people get to listen to them when they come from podcast. People don't always like videos. Secondly, when they do finally start giving adverts, there'll be some pennies in it. As we said, we're going to plough them back into sponsorship depending on how much we earn. So you may be listening to this on the TalkSport network. If you are, just to give you a tiny little bit of background before we start, if that's any better. So just as a kind of an introduction to the TalkSport listeners, if you are listening, and it's windy, I film up in the Lincolnshire Wolds in the wind. It's called a dog walk video because I film it while I'm walking the dog, and it's basically just me chatting into my phone with people watching live on social media. If the sound's not very good, we normally give up, and then you won't be listening to this on the TalkSport network. So there we go. So Mike Smith is saying that the sound's not good. It's very windy. My apologies for that. Please do let me know if that's your experience. And then Chris Skeneely, morning, happy new year, mate. And Kate says, morning, Gary, hope you're well. This is, I need a Britney style microphone. They're worse. I had one of those that clicked on here. It was absolutely awful. Plus, it was a plug-in one, and these new phones, they don't have plugs, do they, anymore? Everybody's kind of, oh, let's go Bluetooth. No wires anymore. It's with wires. I miss wires. It's lounges with wires everywhere that you can trip over. So there we go. If it is too windy, I'll continue doing the feed. We won't put it on the TalkSport network because of that shit. Right. So 3 players returning to Sinsel Bank today. One of them is. Tell me, is that any better in terms of the wind? It might be. I might be covering the microphone a bit more. So Morgan Worsfold-Gregg has returned to the club from Rushden and Diamonds. Jovan McCarmer has returned to the club from Brackley, and Charlie Kendall has returned to the club from Sutton United. So going to the top of that, Morgan Worsfold-Gregg is I think first year professional. I think he signed his first deal last season. Rushden and Diamonds was his first loan spell. It's fair to say it probably hasn't gone how he would have liked. I think that's probably a fair assumption. He hasn't played since September. Last played when they lost 7-0 to Colville. Rushden and Diamonds are having a really, really poor season. They're second from bottom in their division, which I think is a Gainsborough Trinity level, but kind of down south rather than where Gainsborough are. And they've really struggled. It looks to me a little bit like you get a young lad going in there, a bit of technique, which we think he's got. He's come, through a bigger academy. Goes to that sort of level. It can be tough to adjust at first. I think it looks to me, maybe not. I'm not going to say scapegoat, but it looks to me that he was a victim of a really poor run. He got the chop. He hasn't got back in the team. To be fair, results haven't improved, so it's not his fault. I think it was just probably the wrong team. They'll be better he'll be better for going out on loan, but he ain't going to be challenging for the first team now he's come back. And so, yeah, I think young Morgan probably we will be looking to place him on loan somewhere else this season. What wouldn't surprise me is if we looked somewhere like Lincoln United, that kind of level. So he's going to go out, he's going to get some senior men's football at a non-league level. We've progressed in the Papa John's Trophy, but we're at a point now where we're going to be playing as strong a first team, I think, as we possibly can. I can't see the likes of Morgan getting a run out there. So for him, I can certainly see another loan spell. But I don't think he's got the game time he would have liked. I think it was it was just unfortunate. Circumstances dictated that actually he's gone to a club that have really struggled. And as we know, back in kind of 2011, when we came down and we were loaning the likes of Tom Kilby, you put a young player into a struggling side and it can be hard to thrive when the pressure's really on. Whereas we've also then had, we weren't particularly struggling when Charlie Adams came to Sinsel Bank and he kind of thrived. So I think it's just an unfortunate loan. He'll be better for the experience, but I don't think he will have brought away what he wanted to bring away from it. So next up is Jovan. Now, Jovan's a real interesting one because he's actually played as many times for Lincoln, looking at the stats, as he has for his loan team, Brackley. And he scored for us and not for Brackley. So it's not been a great spell for him as well. Now, Brackley are very, very different to Rushden and Diamonds. They're at a higher level. They're second in the National League North behind Doncaster. Not Doncaster, bloody hell, Darlington, rather. They've just signed Adam Rooney, who was obviously at Aberdeen, and he was a big money signing for Salford a couple of years ago. Brackley are going for it. I mean, this is a team that expect, I think, to be National League next season. They're really keen on promotion. You can see that there's a bit of money being spent there. I fear that Jovan has just become a little bit of a victim of that kind of success. You go to a good club who are performing well, and it can be very hard then as a loan player to break in, even if you are a good loan player, even if you're a strong loan player. And I think as a good example, probably, and it's a different position, but Robbie Gotts springs to mind. I think Robbie Gotts is a really good footballer. I think he did well at Lincoln. I think that he could play League One football if he was given the chance. But when he came here, we had a good side. He came in on loan, really hard to get football. And I kind of see a little bit of that around Jovan. I also think the type of striker, probably that level can dictate. And Charlie Kendall probably disputes this argument or disproves this argument. But I think a little bit stronger, a little bit more robust. And Jovan's a big lad, but he's a young lad. And I think it's just been tough for him to kind of break into that successful side. I can see another loan for Jovan. Again, I don't think he's the sort of player who's going to break into the first team, despite having played 3 times for us. If you've only played 3 times in the National League North with Brackley, it's going to be really hard to come and challenge for a first team place in a team that wants to finish top half of League One. So I can see another loan for Jovan. I don't think that it would be in the National League. It could be National League South or North. He could go to Boston United, for instance. I mean, they're struggling, I think, a little bit this season, but he's the sort of player you would want him at that level. If we were going to go a level lower, he'd be going back to the level that he was at last season, and you want to see some progression, I think, from that. So I think, again, with Jovan, I think another loan's on the cards, if I'm honest. And I think, again, he'll be better for the experience, but if he'd come back with 10 games rather than 3 games, you might feel a little bit better for him. 1 second. What are you doing, Charlie? He's struggling to get through the mud. There we go. It's my dog, by the way. If I do put this on TalkSport and you are listening, when I refer to Charlie off microphone, it's my dog who I'm walking out and about round the rather blustery wolds. So the final player coming back, and this is the one I'm sure that everybody's going to want to talk about, everybody's going to have an opinion on, is Charlie Kendall. Now, Charlie Kendall, as you know, signed for his last season from Eastbourne Borough. I think they're Eastbourne Borough, they might not be now. Went back on loan to them, was sensational. And every week it was Charlie Kendall, Charlie Kendall, Charlie Kendall. He scored goals at that level. Started the season with us, scored, I think, in the Carabao Cup against Doncaster. Seemed to have a good game, looked like he was going to be a player that was going to feature in the first team this season. And unfortunately, was then loaned out. Now, I say unfortunately, I think it was always the case. We wanted him to get regular football. Tom Hopper was our captain. Ben House was another striker. So it was going to be hard for Charlie to get regular kind of 25, 30 minutes on the pitch. And you know, the way that we play now, probably even more so, because in the dying stages, you want a lump you can aim for, and that ain't Charlie. Is a willing runner, but he's not a huge kind of strong player. So, you know, I stood by. I backed the loan at the time. I could understand it. I think we left ourselves short in terms of numbers, but in terms of the type of player that Charlie is, I think it was going to be difficult for him to get regular game time. So he went out to Sutton United with a view to playing regular football for them, and didn't happen. I think I worked out he played 230 minutes, which is, you know, it's not even 3 full games for them, which is really disappointing. I think he started 1 or 2. He came from off the bench a lot of the time, and it was just a rubbish loan for him, really. And I say that in terms of playing time. I'm sure it was beneficial in terms of going out to another club, experiencing how another club do things, kind of trying to break into a team, not having it go all your own way, because, you know, it's all right going to the National League South and scoring goals with Eastbourne, and when things are going well, if you're part of that, it's easy to be a part of that, and that makes sense. If you're part of a winning team and you've got 10 players around you doing well, as he did at Eastbourne, and you're pushing for the playoffs and you're the goal scorer, you know, say everything's good, but there we go. Whereas probably Sutton was very, very different. I saw a report saying that he didn't suit Sutton's style of football. If I remember Sutton correctly and their style of football, that's understandable. I mean, I know Kate's message there says, gives me even more reasons to dislike Sutton United. Horrible club. Not a club I like. No, not a club I like at all. And that goes back to the first year on Vauxhall Conference Days. Although I always liked their ground name, Gander Green Lane. And I remember I was working in London one time. I remember driving past Gander Green Lane, and it's like, oh, there we go. So I've just turned into the wind, by the way. So please do tell me if the wind is affecting the sound again. And do comment. I do need to know. So I don't want to put this out as a podcast and it be completely unlistenable. So Charlie Kendall is back. So what does the future hold for Charlie Kendall? Well, he won't hold a Football League loan. I think that's almost certain. I haven't had it confirmed 100%, but I believe you cannot appear for 2 Football League teams in a single, 3 Football League teams in a single season. I think that was lifted during COVID, but I'm not sure that's the case anymore. So I don't think he could go out in the Football League. I think given Sutton's level and how he's done there, I don't think it would be beneficial to loan into another League Two club if it was possible. Because the types of clubs that would want to take a player who hasn't done it at Sutton probably play a similar type of football to that. You know, you wouldn't want to place him at say Gillingham, who are really struggling, and further kind of damage his confidence. God, the wind is bad here. It really is. I think he goes back out on loan, if I'm honest. I don't think that he gets the game time here in the second half of the season. I think, like last season, we're going to be looking at signing a striker in the transfer window, be it somebody on loan. I think we can see a couple going back, be it somebody on loan. I think with Tom Hopper, if he doesn't go, you're going to be bringing him on for the last 20 minutes of games. I don't think he's been the same player since Michael Appleton's kind of playoff season. I think Ben House is our main striker. I think minutes are going to be hard to come by, and I couldn't see Charlie getting 260 odd minutes at Lincoln City as he did at Sutton, and the Sutton one has been a disappointment. And the problem, I think, with keeping him here and kind of doing that, you're almost stopped in his development. I think Charlie Kendall goes back out on loan into the National League. I don't see it, although it's a step back in terms of where he's been this season. It's not a step back in terms of where he was performing well last season. So I think a loan into the... Can everybody hear me okay? Just please, somebody comment and let me know if you can hear me okay, because this is breezy as anything. So I think a loan into the National League would actually be beneficial for him, but it's got to be on a guarantee of game time. So he's got to go to a National League club where, you know, he's going to be starting games. Now that's a difficult one to it's difficult to stipulate. You can't really say to somebody, to a team, he has to start every game when you're Lincoln City. It's different if you're loaning Morgan Rogers from Manchester City to Lincoln City. I think that's something that, you know, you can kind of stipulate. I think if you're Lincoln and saying it to Charlie Kendall, it's a little bit different. So thank you for all your comments on the sound. A little bit scratchy, I'm told, but the sound is okay. I'm walking directly into the wind, so for me it's blowing a gale. I'm trying to protect the microphone a little bit. So I think Charlie Kendall probably goes out on loan. You look down the National League. I mean, Scunthorpe would be a decent loan. He ain't going to go to a Chesterfield or a Wrexham. You don't loan him to a top of the table team, mid-table and down and lower. Possibly one from down the south end of the country. Maybe it seems to be where, a little bit closer to home. Or you loan him to one close here. And Connor's just said York City, that sort of loan as well. Obviously, they've had Remy in the past offers on loan, and then he moved there. I think they've got the keeper. They've got Ethan Ross. Is he at York City now as well? And I think they've got big Lenny John Lewis. I might be wrong, and if they have, you could see Kendall playing off him. So I could see a loan spell again for Charlie. But if he comes in, there's some B team games planned. We're going to have a look at some players. I would imagine those B team games, as they're being billed, might even be an opportunity to see some trialists, that sort of thing. So if he does well in those, who knows? Who knows? Kate Jackson just said Maidenhead might be a good shout for Kendall. Down south, we probably welcome a striker with a proven record to score them out of the relegation battle. Indeed, and remember, Charlie Kendall going to the National League would be like a player having scored goals in League One, then been into a Premier League club and struggled, and then signed by a Championship club. It's kind of a halfway house, isn't it? So when you think about it like that, the level for League Two may or may not have proven too much for him this season. Remember, he's still only a young lad. So I don't think it's a massive step down. I think the problem is if this season you loan Charlie Kendall back to Eastbourne, for instance, because then you're kind of suggesting that it's not been a beneficial year as a whole. I think you've got to look for National League if there's a taker. Absolutely, if there's a taker. Okay, so we'll go back through some of the comments. There's quite a few. So I've picked up on a couple of them. Chris Graham says, morning, happy new year from a wet, windy and cold Germany. Yep, I say it's not cold, but it's certainly windy here. Thank you, Chew Olds. I've got a rather reluctant dog. I wonder if he's going to follow me back now on my walk. Kate says, not going to lie, can't see any of these three challenging for a place. Kendall is not match fit for the two places, but the standard won't pay you like a League One. They played probably fewer minutes, or even around the same number of minutes. So again, I agree, Kate, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Brian Rundle says, morning, mate. Solid 2 points over the festive period against two very strong teams. Thoughts on Kendall returning? Obviously, I've given that. Yeah, look, the festive period on paper doesn't look great, does it? 2 points from 9. The game we didn't get points in is the one that you would go, well, we could take 3. If somebody said you're going to take 3 points from 9, I would have gone, well, that'll be against Burton, won't it? What we've got to do, and I sound like myself last season, got to find a way to beat the teams we're supposed to beat. This month especially. Charlton on Saturday is actually the sort of game that you think, well, that's one we could go and win, because they're going to have to come at us, they're going to have to be strong. This is Gale Thoughts. This is an unbelievable win. They're going to have to come at us. They're the home team, but they're not actually that good either. And I think they're taken. After that, we got Cambridge, MK Dons, and Burton. On paper, this Lincoln City team should take 9 points from those. You'd be happy with 6 or 7. Anything less than 4 would be a bit of a disappointment, I think. If we can 4 games in January, if you can take 8 points from those, puts you in a much better position going into the final few months of the season, without a doubt. Mike Smith says, looking forward to seeing Kendall get a run in the team. Won't happen, I don't think. I'm hoping we can solve our striker issue. Don't think we have one. Looks like a striker needs a chance, not just bit part piss pop cup games. I've got to disagree, Mike. I've got to disagree. I don't think we have a striker problem. Ben House has scored 7 goals from open play, and he's played the first couple of games of the season in midfield. I think from the offing games, Ben House is our first choice striker. So therefore, if we play one striker and we have a striker who's suitable to play up front, technically we don't have a striker problem. The issue that we have is later in games where you need to change it. For instance, you get a man sent off and you want to go 4-3-2 and 2 up top. That's an issue. For me, Tom Hopper's not been doing it at all, and I know somebody's commented further down. I think it might even be Mike again. that Hopper's struggled, and he has. He hasn't looked a patch on the Tom Hopper that we saw 18 months, 2 years ago. Not at all. So we have a striker issue in terms of backup. I don't call it an issue in terms of being around the first team. I really don't. In fact, I think one of the biggest issues we need to sort around the first team is actually the wide players, because Jordan Garrick hasn't done it. Danny Mandrew has been unfit most of the time. We all love Jack Diamond, but if you actually look at his goals and assists and take out penalties, it's all right. But we don't have a Morgan Rogers or I hate to say it, Brennan or a George Graham who creates something from nothing, where a moment of brilliance goes, oh, what a ball that is. Mandrew's shown little flicks and tricks, but that's not Jack. Jack Diamond is run at you, draw a foul, but he's not out and out creativity. For me, the problem is in the out and out creativity. On midfield, I really like Matty Virtue, I really like Max Sanders, but you haven't got the Peter Gain, the George Grant spark right there. That's where I think, if I say an issue, for me, you say issue and it makes it sound like there's a fundamental problem with the team. That's the next thing we need to address on our path to evolution. So it's not a fundamental issue. It's not me going, that's wrong with our team at the moment. It's me saying that's the next area that we need to improve in. And then maybe we'll find out actually how aware or how big our so-called or perceived striker issue is. Because if you're putting the right balls into the box, the little dinks, the turns around the corner, the balls around the corner, that sort of thing, and your striker's then not picking up on them, then it's an issue. But when you don't have those balls going into the box, so you don't know if your striker's picking up on them or not, I don't think it's an issue. Does that make sense to people? I actually think Ben House is an intelligent footballer who makes the right runs, who could be a 20-goal a season striker. I think he's that aware. I think it's the creativity around. So thank you for that point there, Mike. I got a bit of conversation, didn't it? Miranda, aka Tall and Sparkly. Well, there's a moniker for you. Morning, Gary, and Happy New Year. David Spencer says the sound is fine now. That was a while ago. Dale Warner makes a good point. Charlie, we're going back, boy. Come on. The Irish League starts again in February. Do you think any of them could be loaned out there again? Why not? Because look at what it did for Sean Rowan. So absolutely, Charlie Kendall could go over to Ireland. The question you have to raise is at what standard is Irish football? He goes to Shamrock Rovers, League One Championship standard, League One standard. I mean, they play in Europe, but, you know, probably not that standard. You go over to Drogheda in the same division, what's the standard? So, yeah, it depends which is beneficial. It could be one for Jovan. It could be a good loan for Jovan, that one. To have him playing regular football through the summer and then coming back to us next season where we can make a bit of a call on it. Again, for Morgan, I just think Morgan at the moment probably hasn't had enough experience here. Bear in mind, Sam Long had a loan out here before, and Shoro was Irish, which might have been behind the Irish loan. The other things Sam had the loan, Sean was Irish. These guys haven't really had the successful loan, and neither are Irish, so it's whether it would be a big culture shock. But it'd be a good learning curve. It's a good shout, Dale. I like that. James always says, sign a player on loan, realise it doesn't suit the style of play. Great recruitment. That's a reference to Sutton United. Remember a story. I'm sure Imps fans of a certain age will remember this. I think Kev Barwise is on. Kev will remember this. Phil Stam signed for Lincoln. At the time, he was a pretty big name. He had come out of the army. He'd created a kind of a big news story coming out of the army to play for somebody or other. I think it was Hereford, but I might be wrong. Anyway, we ended up signing him on loan, and he was an out-and-out striker. I mean, we know what Phil Stam was from his second spell at the club, and when he came here, he'd been a big name in lower league circles, in the same way that when you look back at names like John Parkin and Darren Rowbottom and Joe Allen and Leo Fortune West, these are players who at some point during their career have been at the top of the goal scorers charts in the division. And he walked into Alan Clark, and Alan Clark said to him, so what are your strengths? He'd never seen him play, didn't know who he was. And that's awful management. Now, whether that's the case with Sutton or not, I don't know. I would actually think that the not suiting their style of play is because their style of play has either changed through the course of the season or it wasn't what it was sold. I don't believe that Lincoln City and Jez George in particular would loan Charlie Kendall out to a club that was entirely a bad fit from the off. So I would say it's something more that's gone on through the course of the season. Connor, he hopes Charlie Kendall can get some solid game time and back some goals. The Sutton loan might affect his confidence. It might have done. At the same time, it might have been a nice leveller because he had a great season at Eastbourne. It might just be a wake up. This is what League One, or this is what the Football League is all about. And you have to think back to Tom Pett when he first came to Lincoln. This is what's expected at Lincoln City, and he struggled with that, and then he improved. Jamie Robson, when he first dropped out of the Scottish Prem last season, there was an element of he's struggling to adapt, and then I think he has adapted it to a certain degree this season. So I think it's interesting. I think it could be a good learning curve. I don't think that if the club kind of frame it as it's been brilliant for him, because I don't think it's been brilliant for him at all. But it's been a loan spell, it's experience, it's life experience. Think about your own lives. If you've had a job and you've gone to another job and the other job's been crap, you've learned something from it, you've come away with something from it. I've done it a couple of times. You learn about yourself, you learn about your career, you learn about where you want to work, what you want to do. So there will be learning points and developmental points for Charlie to bring away from that loan spell. And I hope that he's the type of player that can take those positives rather than the negatives. And I think listening to stories about him and how he kind of is keen to develop and he watches videos on the coach and stuff like that, I think that he'll probably be somebody that takes the positives. Morning, Jimmy Atkin. Hope you're well, mate. People say the sound was a bit scratchy. Like Smith said, sent Hopper out on loan as well. Kate obviously shouting Maidenhead. Connor says, want Kendall to come back and challenge the first team next season. That's the key. That's the key. I think if we can get him out on loan in the National League this season for 6 months or however many months of the season's left, 5 months, 4 months, and he goes there and he plays 15, 20 games for somebody and scores 5 goals, let's say. He comes back here with more of an understanding of senior football. And remember, Ben House, this time last year, was playing for Eastland. So it's possible to develop very, very quickly into a League One footballer. Because Ben House is absolutely a League One footballer and a very good one for me at that. Ed Little, morning, pal. Happy New Year, Gary. Weather in the Wolds looks very fresh this morning. Do you know what? It's warm. It's just windy. I mean, it's beautiful. I'll risk the wind just to show you. I mean, it really is. Beautiful. It's just so booming windy. Here he is, the main house in Carwise. Oh, it's great rabbit on that. I'm not looking where I'm going. You can hear me, that's good. Happy New Year, same to you. Hope the ticket's holding up, dude. Let's be honest, did we really see any of the returning loans ever threatening the first team? Because I don't. Kendall, yes, I do see him threatening the first team. I think it would be wrong to rule out Jovan for his physicality, but I think that Jovan is 2 or 3 years away from being somebody that we would expect to threaten the first team. But that's what development's about, isn't it? Sometimes these players take a long, long while, and I think Callum Lang, I might be wrong. Is he the lad that was at Wigan and he went out on different loans, and it just takes time. And I think that there's this idea in football that you're a young player at 18. If they're a big name or you've got a lot of hope, it's stick them in, give them a chance, they'll develop, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not always sure that's the case. Sometimes I think that a player actually probably needs 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And binning them off at 17, 18 or writing them off is probably a fallacy. And the other issue that we have, and Jovan hasn't had this as much as Charlie Kendall and Freddie Draper, is building them up. So Charlie scores against Doncaster. He's got all those goals for Eastbourne. Everybody thinks he's going to come in and score 20 goals. Mo Isa did it, Greenwich Borough, when he went to Cheltenham. Why not Charlie? So then when he doesn't, it feels a disappointment when actually he's probably just on his stage, on his development. But whereas Jovan actually didn't really look much when I first saw him. He went out to Gainsborough, had a decent load of Gainsborough. They quite liked him there. he's gone out to Brackley, but nobody's thinking, well, Jovan McCarthy should be playing in the first team. They're thinking Freddie Draper should, they're thinking Charlie Kendall should, but not Jovan. And I think he's probably likely to develop better because of that. There isn't the pressure. He can be around a League One football team. He can be around the training ground, around our strikers, around the players, and then he can go off and develop at his own pace, hopefully. Freddie Draper's the other one, isn't it? You know, we're talking about Charlie Kendall and John McCarthy coming back as strikers. Then we've got young Freddie Draper, who everybody was saying, you know, he's going to be a big thing, and Mike Clapperton saying he should be Lincoln starting number 9 in a year, otherwise I haven't done my job. Well, he ain't. So he's one I think needs a loan spell, and I actually think he needs a loan spell at the same level Charlie Kendall had last season at this time. And I know it's all right saying, oh, we want him in the League Two, want him in the National League. The reason, you know, he needs to go somewhere where he's going to play games. We've over-promoted Charlie Kendall this season to Sutton, and it hasn't worked for him. If he'd gone to a National League team in September, everyone would have been spitting feathers. So, you know, the club, damned if they do, damned if they don't. Everyone would have been saying it's too low a level. But if he'd gone to Scunthorpe and scored 7 or 8 goals for them, there would be a real air of positivity around it. I don't think loaning Freddie to Gainsborough Trinity is really what we want to do. He's got to be National League North or South minimum, but I think that'd be a good loan for him, to be honest. I'm now out the wind, which is brilliant. The Blackpool manager situation might impact our wishes for Matty Virtue in the future. He hasn't gone, has he, Michael Appleton? So it depends, doesn't it? Matty Virtue's injury kind of dictates that a little bit as well. So Pete Bogg, do you know what? I knew someone was going to ask this. So Pete, I hope you're well. Hope you're well, pal. What do you think of the ref standard at the Bank this year? On the whole, I don't have a major problem with it. I don't. Look, let's ignore Bolton, because that was appalling. He was an appalling referee. We know he was. Yeah, and he was probably conned by a team who do very, very well at manipulating the referee. Very much like a Steve Evans team. Dare I say, to a lesser degree, like a Danny Cowley team. You know, they tried to referee the game themselves. They were in the linesman's ear. You could see their players were, there was theatrics. They were a mishmash of an Evans team and a Danny Cowley team and a Neil Warnock team. And the ref bought it. Weak refereeing, missed the big calls. Declan Bourne against Ipswich, not a bad referee. He wasn't. Do you know what? Look at the main points. Look at the main issues again. The Ben House foul. It's not a foul. The ball has run across the defender. The defender's gone in a straight line. Ben's got to get across him. He's not in control of that ball, and he doesn't get across the defender to get a shot away. At the end of the day, it's not a penalty. It pains me to say it, but it's not. The Adam Jackson foul is right on the border of yellow and red. As a Lincoln fan, you see it and you go, that's never a red. But if it's a red shirt being fouled by a blue shirt, you want a red card for that. You know, unless it's in the area and you get a penalty, the double jeopardy rule means he's not sent off. But you want a red card for that if you're a Lincoln fan. I've watched it back. You do. It's all right saying Powdy could come across and cover, but I have seen instances at Sinsel Bank where players have been booked in that situation. I've seen instances where they say there's a covering player and we've gone, that player was not covering, they should have walked. It's 50-50, man. It's 50-50. The penalty we did get, great refereeing. And in the first half, he did the opposite. There was a tangle. One of their players was committing an offence. The corner came in and he immediately blew for a free kick the other way. Jeff Eltringham did it against Bolton as well. But he's then warned Kane Vincent-Young, I think, for holding Powdy. Vincent-Young's done the same thing. The referee's been watching it. I made a point. Nowadays, at set pieces, I'm trying to watch those things. I'm trying to understand set pieces a little bit better in terms of what goes on. For a corner, when you're watching a corner, 9 times out of 10, you'll watch the corner taker and the ball come over. But if you pick a spot in the area and watch that, and Vincent-Young did exactly what he'd been warned for. It's a penalty, and it was good refereeing for him to keep that eye on, spot that, and be brave enough to give it. In the final minute, Tom Hopper's wrestled to the floor by Freddie Ladapo, looking for it too much. He's got eyes on the referee as he's going down. He's looking for the penalty there. Props does that a little bit too much. I don't think on the whole there was a lot wrong. I've watched a high kick on TJ Ioma. TJ stooping. You know, his head is about the same height probably as as the player's head when Billy Knott was sent off against Notts County all them years ago. I was incandescent with rage that Billy shouldn't have been sent off. There's no way that I could hold my head up high by claiming that their lad should have been sent off for a similar offence. So actually, Declan Bourne against Ipswich, he didn't have a bad game. We perceived him to have a bad game. We did. And I think because we'd just had the clown against Bolton, you know, we were ready for the referee to have a bad game, but he didn't have, and we haven't had a lot of bad referees this season, not really. Morning, Gary. What's the name of the tune that comes on at the beginning of the Stacey West Live videos? It's called the Lincolnshire Poacher. It's a really old record that I was sent a long, long while ago. So I think it's the 50s or 60s squads that do it. Daz Reed says we signed Stamped on loan from Notts County. Stand corrected, Daz. I think he played for Hereford, though, Eddie. Possibly. Mike Smith, any news of the Virtue injury? Are loans staying? Honest answer, no idea. Not a chance. Connor Pierce says not yet. Don't know what that means, but it was something I said. Bry Fox sounded like Norman Collier for a while. Okay, so I'll have to listen back to that. Might not be able to put this one up as a podcast. Never mind, eh? And my good friend Pete, I hope you're well. I will ring you, mate, tomorrow to chat about Dropkick Murphys. So I'm not saying I agree, but ITV highlights didn't think it was a penalty. Our penalty, yeah, it was. Mainly because he's been warned for it. I think that you see that sort of offence in the area often, and it doesn't go punished. But I think the fact that he's warned Vincent Young and then he's watching it, it's a foul. But I do think generally you could give a penalty or a free kick 99% of corners at this level. You can. And there was a Bolton fan talking about the Afolayan elbow, the Afolayan assault, as I like to call it. And he said, your player's not looking at the ball, he's watching Afolayan. That means that he's trying to foul Afolayan in the first instance. And whether he was trying to justify the fact that he was then taken out by a forearm smash, I don't know. But again, if you watch corners, and honestly, there's 40, 50 of you have been watching this. Next time we take corners, just watch in the area, and you'll see the pushing and shoving is 50-50 every time. It really is. And I think you could have a justifiable shout for a penalty in most of those instances. You could have a justifiable shout for a free kick against the attackers in most of those instances. If there's a free kick given, it's almost always against the attacker. If you're a referee and you have said to a player, you've got to stop committing that infringement, and he does it again, it has to give a penalty. It's stupidity from the player's point of view. Whether the same infringement occurs next time or the time after, but you have to give a penalty if you call him up on it. You have to. And I actually thought it was strong referee, and he's had a word, but if he has to do it, it's that simple. Right, so we're going to jump in now. So I'm done and dusted, 37 minutes in. I hope you enjoyed the dog walk this morning. I'll try and focus. I'll try and get you out of the wind for a moment. I hope you've enjoyed the dog walk this morning. Fingers crossed we might hear a little bit going forward about potential transfers. I'm sure there's lots of work going on down at the club at the moment. Big game on Saturday. We'll have all the usual content leading into that. But other than that, I hope you are happy Wednesday. Happy New Year. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you. Bye.